Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be creating a card using the Lovely Layers Peony die set and also doing some minimalistic ink blending. First, let's take a look at the die set. Now I have mine stored on some large magnet sheets and I am going to die cut out the main peony flower from white cardstock, and I'm using 80-pound white cardstock because as these layers build up, it does add dimension. So I'm starting with a lighter weight of cardstock. What I like to do once I die cut everything from white is I layer them together. I start fitting these pieces together. It's kind of like a puzzle. So you just need to take a look at what piece is going to go on the bottom and then how each is going to layer together. And this is also going to give me an idea of where I want to add my color to. After I have that all figured out, I'm going to create an element for my card, and one thing that I really like to use is the Art Deco Labels die set. I took two of the labels that are pretty close in size, layered them together on some matte gold cardstock, and then ran that through the die cut machine to create my own frame. This creates a very elegant look, and I really did like this with having my peony in white, but I thought I should add just a pop of color. But this would make a beautiful wedding card, just to give you some ideas. So I mentioned earlier I was going to do minimalistic ink blending, and what I mean by that is I am adding just barely any ink to the very outer edges of the petals. And I'm starting with that bottom layer, and what I like to do when I'm doing this is I have the next layer ready that I can place on top so I know exactly what part of the petal is going to be showing. Then I'm using a small ink blending tool. You can use any small ink blending tool that you have, but I do recommend it be a smaller one, not really the big brushes. The reason I suggest that is because you're going to have more control over where your ink is going. And actually, I probably get more ink on my media mat here than I do actually on the flower because I wanted just the very tip of those petals. This combination is actually inspired by one of my peony bushes that I have that I can't wait for it to bloom, where it's just the very outer edges are color. And to do this, I am using picked raspberry distress oxide ink, and I'm blending it using a waffle flower. I think this is a Stencil Mat. So it's a silicone surface that's kind of holding my pieces down while I blend. Every now and then I'll bring in all my pieces and line them up just to make sure I'm getting the look that I want. But I always kind of start with having the next layer on top, just so I know exactly what edge of the petal is going to show through and where I need to add that ink to. I'll continue doing that for all of the petals for my peony flower, and then I'm going to work on the leaves. So for the leaves, I wanted to keep this really simple. I didn't want to add a ton of color to this. So I'm using Twisted Citron Distress Oxide ink, so it's a very bright green, and you can see I'm leaving quite a bit of white space on my leaves. I thought that just kind of added to the elegant touch that this card is going to have. Once I have those all colored, then I'm just taking my peony and I'm making sure I have all the layers in the right position. I always start this way before I start adhering anything down. So just making sure that the layers are in the right spot. And then I'm going to attach them with a tape runner. Now you could really use any type of adhesive that you prefer if you like liquid glue. The reason I'm choosing to use a tape runner is because this isn't going to permanently adhere until I really push this down hard. And even though I push down, if I happen to use the wrong layer, I can still quickly peel that back up. Whereas liquid glue, that's going to be a little tougher and probably ruin my piece if I try to remove it. So tape runner for me is just the best option, but totally use whatever you happen to have on hand. Now, another thing you could have done, which I didn't do, but it is another option, is spread out all of your pieces for the flower and add maybe flicks of gold. If you have gold in Perfect Pearls or any type of liquid gold watercolor, I think adding just flicks of that all over the petals would be a beautiful touch as well. I've also seen people pop up each layer of this flower with some foam tape. I didn't do that today because I know I'm going to end up adding dimension using whether it's a sentiment or my backer piece. So I'm just completely adhering this with the tape runner. I did end up deciding that I wanted to pop up my panel that's going to have that Art Deco frame. So I die cut a frame using the Honeybee Stamps double-sided foam sheets. I'm using the largest one that's going to be able to fit my frame, And I'm just trimming out a piece so I can save the rest of this foam for later. Run that through the die cut machine, and I also die cut out a piece of white cardstock to add on top. So this just fits together perfectly on top. I'll remove the backing sheet of that foam and add my white panel on top. This particular foam that I'm using is not really super thick, so it's going to create a little bit of dimension but not add a lot of bulk. And since I had run it through the die cut machine, it did flatten a little bit, so it will kind of pop up just a little bit more after it settles. To attach my gold frame, I'm just going to use my Barely Art liquid glue because it has that super fine tip, and add dots of glue all around that frame, and then I can line this up over that panel that I just adhered to the foam. Off screen, I die cut the word big, which is from the big Buzzword Die Set. I die cut that twice from white cardstock and once from the matte gold cardstock, and layered those together. Then I'm going to bring this all over to my mini Misti, and I'm going to line it up about where everything is going to go. I had really thought about stamping an additional sentiment on black cardstock and heat embossing with white, but black just seemed too much for how delicate this was all looking to be. So I just lined everything up, lined up the word hugs where I wanted it to be. It's going to be snuggled in the word big, removed everything, and then stamped the word hugs in the intense black ink. I'm being super careful and delicate because my Art Deco label here is already popped up with foam, so it's not quite flat in my Misti tool, so I'm just being very careful when I'm stamping that not to squish my letters. Now I can work on the assembly of my card. So I'm taking this popped up panel and I'm adding it to a card front I created with Turquoise C cardstock. And then I'm going to add my peony here. Now I used some of that leftover double-sided foam from earlier, and I added it to the outer edges of the petals that's going to be closest to my sentiment. The rest of the area I'm going to add some liquid glue to. Then I'll just add that down into the corner, and I will also bring in that big buzzword that I created with the matte gold cardstock. I will add that to the front of the card as well using my liquid glue and my tweezers, just helping making sure that I have that placed perfectly right where I stamped the word hugs. So after all of this is complete, I will flip it over and trim off any of the excess leaves that are hanging off, and that will finish up the card project. I very well could have added some embellishments, sequins, things like that, but I really liked the simplicity of this and that minimalistic ink blending that I had done. It was just enough to highlight the flower, really make it pop against the stark white of the cardstock. I really love the lovely layering dies that Honeybee provides because they are really easy to put together and they make such gorgeous images. I hope you enjoyed today's card inspiration. Thank you so much for joining me today.